Hello, kia ora. Welcome to the Futures Workshop, a new podcast where we talk to the world's leading futures thinkers about tools they've developed to help imagine and shape the future. Today we're offering a bit of a different experience by taking you through an imagined Three Horizons workshop. Whether you're new to this concept or have some familiarity, the episode will provide a more immersive look at how the Three Horizons framework works in practice. I'm Victoria Mulligan, your host, and today I'll be facilitating the session. A quick reminder that this is our second episode on Three Horizons. For the story and the theory behind the framework, listen to episode 1 for our conversation with Bill Sharp. For the experienced facilitators out there, as you listen to this workshop, you may notice there are some elements that I've skipped or glossed over. For example, you might have heard Bill talking about the option of having participants name the horizons they're bringing into the room, or role-playing various perspectives. Well, we're not doing any of that today. This is a 20-minute podcast, but in my experience, you would expect to spend anywhere from an hour to half a day, depending on group size and what they hope to get out of the session. But do return to episode 1 and check out the show notes for resources that can help you prepare a Three Horizons workshop with all the bells and whistles. Today we're giving you a very high-level run-through of how you might introduce, explain, and move through the horizons with a group. You'll hear examples given by group members and hopefully get a sense of what it might feel like to experience better conversations about the future. And just to repeat what I said in episode 1, this is a bit of an experiment. We're learning by doing, so bear with us as we try out a few different things along the way. Before we dive into the workshop, let's take a moment to remember what the Three Horizons framework is and why it's so powerful. The model can be applied to any issue to help us think about the need for the current situation to change, Horizon 1, a vision for the future, Horizon 3, and ideas for how to get there from where we are now, Horizon 2. It also helps us consider how things may change over time. Horizon 1 looks at current trends and issues. Horizon 2 explores emerging trends. And Horizon 3 focuses on trends that might dominate the future, presenting competing visions. So let's start by identifying a focal issue or question. And for our workshop today, I've decided to focus on the future of sustainable urban living. We're in a room set up with large sheets of paper on the wall. We have 3 horizons mapped. You can see these horizons in the show notes, and if you're not looking at the show notes right now, it doesn't matter, it's not critical to the rest of the session. We have marker pens, red for H1, blue for H2, and green for H3. We also have thinner marker pens so people can write legibly on the sticky notes. We have pink sticky notes for H1, we're using blue for H2, and green for H3. And because the model is very visual, having things in the right colours can really help people get into it, understand it, and it makes for a good output. We're in a comfortable space with a group of 7 people today. All right, today we're focusing on the future of urban living. How can we transform our cities to be more sustainable and livable by 2040? There's no right answer, and I'm keen to hear from each of you over the course of the session. So let's start with Horizon 1. I want us to look at the current system and identify areas under strain or areas that are failing to meet emerging needs. What evidence do you see around you that suggests the current system is under strain, shows a decreasing fit to the emerging conditions, knowledge and societal requirements, or is even failing? We're going to take some time to write your points on sticky notes, and then I'm going to ask you to put them on Horizon 1. We'll come back together and talk through the points that you've put up on the chart. Okay, I can see one up there for increasing traffic congestion and pollution. Can you talk to me a bit about what that means?
Yeah, I just thought congestion's a big problem and it's not going to get any better. And with congestion comes more pollution, so both those together are quite unsustainable in the long run. I also, as part of that, wanted to mention heat islands, which is this idea that with all the traffic comes lots of roads, these vast concrete expanses, and that creates another problem which makes cities uncomfortably hot.
It's a great explanation, thank you. How about this one here around affordable housing?
Well, that's a problem in itself, but it also pushes people further from the city centres. So, actually, to that point about traffic, the further you are from the city centre, the longer your commute time. Also, even if you do live next to the city, the infrastructure for cycling and walking to work are pretty poor. So that discourages people from using transport options that actually might take cars off the road that might be healthier or more sustainable.
Great, and that's a good link to the last post-it note that I see up here around outdated public transport systems.
Yeah, a lot of our public transport systems were designed at a time when the population was much lower. So they're not even right for now, let alone with a growing population. So I think that's kind of a problem.
Good point. And I see one there around not enough green space. Can you talk to me about that?
I think that's a quality of life issue. Quality of life's low when there's less opportunity to go somewhere and breathing some fresh air, and also less green space means less places to exercise.
Okay, this is really good stuff. I keep asking these questions until I feel like the energy's dropped or when it feels like there's been enough coverage of the issue. So when the moment's right, I'll move on to the next question for the group. What's holding this current system in place? Here we're looking to identify barriers to change. We're still on Horizon 1, so I'm going to stick to the pink post-its. And I want you to think about what entrenched, maybe interests, policies or mindsets are maintaining the status quo. Have a think and write your thoughts down on the pink post-it notes that you've got in front of you. Once you've written them down, pop them up on the Horizon 1 chart and we'll come back to them as a group again. Okay, I see here that we have a note around resistance to change from established industries. Can you talk to me about that?
Well, industries that are going well at the moment may be reluctant to actually change anything. And then there's this other problem of governments being reluctant to fund new infrastructure adequately. And that kind of combines with this government reluctance to fund new infrastructure adequately.
All right, and we have one around car ownership too.
Yeah, I think there's a cultural attachment to car ownership, and for all the other reasons, not to say public transport, just the love of owning and driving a car may be holding us back from widespread adoption.
And we have comments here around political cycles. Can whoever wrote that maybe give me a bit more detail?
Yeah, there are actually policies that encourage people to jump in their cars. So even if you are saying we want people to take public transport, actually your policies are making it much more convenient and sometimes cheaper to take a car. That's actually exacerbated by political cycles that are quite short. So even if everyone agreed that long term a different strategy might be sustainable, actually politicians are incentivized to think only the short term, so the good long term stuff never gets agreed to and never gets done.
Great comments. Once again, we'll keep collecting and sharing these ideas until we feel the energy drop or that we've exhausted all that we want to talk about here. At that point, we'll leave Horizon 1 behind and move on to Horizon 3. We're going to use green sticky notes for Horizon 3. This is where we envision a transformed future. Today I'm asking, what might a future sustainable city look like and what values might support it? So I'm going to ask each of you to have a think about that question. And same rules apply. You have the green post-it notes in front of you now. Pop some thoughts down to answer that question and we'll come back together as a group. Okay, so I see comments up there around, again, a city with extensive green spaces. What might that mean? What might that look like?
Yeah, I'm picturing a city with lots of parks. I'm also seeing clean energy sources, efficient public transport system, efficient public transport systems. I'm also kind of envisaging a community orientated approach where we use local resources to try and help with and foster resilience.
Wonderful. And we have energy efficient housing, I see as well.
Yeah, these are community design houses. They're not only energy efficient, but hopefully they're affordable too. They're close to lots of things you need, supermarkets and doctors and so forth, so that the need for long commutes is reduced. There's probably also some shared working spaces nearby. And there's a strong focus on renewable energy and smart grid systems to make sure they're sustainable too.
Great. And well-being, I see that there's a comment here around community well-being. Can we talk a bit more about that one?
Yeah, I'm imagining cities where this is actually a real emphasis when you're building communities and structures, that well-being is a priority. That there are policies at local and central government level that support health and education and social inclusion, all those sort of things that make community work. And I'm adding robust public transport systems and infrastructure for bikes and bike sharing, and also pedestrian-friendly infrastructure for people close enough to walk.
At this point, as people are sharing their visions, I would encourage others in the room, to pitch in with their own thoughts and reflections on what that might look, feel, and be experienced like. And the dynamics of the conversation will depend a lot on the mix of the people in the room and how well they know each other. So the more that you as a facilitator can foster the exchange of ideas, the Horizons framework will be all the better for it. So once we've reached the point where we feel like we have a shared, desired future vision, we can leave Horizon 3 behind and we move on to Horizon 2. So Horizon 2 is going to include real people doing real things that bridge that gap between the now, our Horizon 1, and the Horizon 3 future vision we've just spent time on. So what innovations do you know about that are responding to some of these challenges? You'll see you have blue sticky notes in front of you now. I want you to take some time to think about the questions and jot down some of those innovations. We'll come back together as a group to discuss. All right, Horizon 2, I see notes there. Let's talk through some of these. So I can see one around electric buses and bike sharing schemes. Can you give me some more detail on what are these innovations that are currently there?
Yeah, I've seen these electric buses on the news. They sound like they could be the future. In the bike sharing scheme, there's a couple of workplaces that do it, and I can really imagine it taking off. Obviously, both of those initiatives reduce traffic and pollution.
Wonderful. And I see something around urban farming initiatives. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, this is the idea that you can have farms actually within cities to provide food for locals, and often those farms double as green spaces.
Smart city technologies. I'd love to hear more about that one.
Yeah, in some really kind of progressive cities, I understand they have these technologies that actually optimize energy use throughout the city. And they incorporate those technologies when they're doing urban planning, so that actually the city's built around this idea of optimal energy use.
And we have one here for public-private partnerships as well.
Yeah, there are some cities where public money isn't enough to turn urban areas around. So they do these partnerships with private business, and they develop mixed-use buildings together. And so they've got residential and commercial and recreational spaces all in the same precinct, and it's funded with a combination of public and private money.
Co-housing projects. I see that one on a blue sticky note up there.
Yeah, there's a couple of these around my city. They're basically designed as affordable living spaces, but they're also very community orientated. There's one near me where all the houses are pointing towards this shared common green area. And they have things like integrated waste management systems and recycling to reduce landfill use. It's all good stuff.
All great examples. And just a note, as a facilitator, you might find that people start coming up with their own new ideas in H2. But what you're looking for here is things that are already happening. So innovations that are already in play, real people doing real things for H2. Now we want to ask the group whether or not of these H2 innovations, which of them might be H2 plus or H2 minus. A reminder that H2 plus is innovations that are driving change toward that H3 vision. And H2 minus might be supporting or sustaining the status quo of H1. And if we can work out which is which, it'll help us prioritise efforts and resources toward those H2 initiatives that have potential to achieve our long-term vision, rather than just preserving what we have in the present. All right, so let's take one of those examples and determine whether it's H2 plus or H2 minus. So co-housing projects that are providing affordable, community-oriented living spaces. It helps to discuss this as a group, but for ease right now, I'm going to talk us through it. So co-housing projects are a really great innovation in urban living. They offer a solution to the lack of affordable housing, and they create a sense of community and shared responsibility. However, we still need to analyse whether or not they're simply sustaining a current system or driving significant change toward our vision of the sustainable city. I'm going to call these H2 plus. Co-housing projects are a great innovation in urban living. They offer a solution to the lack of affordable housing and create a sense of community and shared responsibility. If these projects are integrated into broader urban planning and supported by policies that promote sustainable living, they're driving change toward a future where affordable, community-oriented housing is the norm, contributing to the transformation of our cities. So on that sticky note in the corner, I'm going to write H2 plus. We'll go through each of the sticky notes in Horizon 2 and determine whether or not we think these are H2 plus or H2 minus, and pop that on the post-it note too. Let's quickly look at what an H2 minus might look like. Stacked car parks, for example, is a solution to the urban parking issues. Might seem like a practical solution to address the lack of parking space in our cities, but encourages continued use of our cars. It makes traffic congestion worse, contributes to pollution, and it's taking up a lot of valuable urban space that could be used for green areas or housing or community spaces. And by focusing on accommodating more cars, we're reinforcing the current car-dependent infrastructure instead of promoting sustainable transport alternatives. And so, stacked car parks might be seen as an H2 minus innovation because it sustains the status quo and doesn't drive meaningful change toward that future vision that we mapped out in Horizon 3. So once we've gone through all of the Horizon 2 sticky notes and we've identified them as H2 plus or minus, we can leave Horizon 2 behind and move on to the next stage of horizon planning. Now we're going to tell a story about the 3 horizons to understand how change is happening. I'm going to invite everyone to gather around the map and imagine that we're in that 3rd horizon. It's the year 2040, and I want to know, how did we get here? I'm going to ask the group to tell me that story. How did we get to our 3rd horizon? I like to start by giving an example so it's really clear what we're looking for. So here's my story of how we got to that 3rd horizon, the future that we're in now in 2040. In 2023, cities faced traffic congestion and pollution, but innovations like electric buses and smart city technologies started gaining traction. These early signs of change, combined with policy shifts, public support, they all created momentum. Community initiatives like co-housing projects showcased the way that we can be living more sustainably, and it started to influence broader policy changes. By 2040, our cities transformed into green, efficient, and inclusive spaces that were driven by this shared vision of sustainability. Now I'd like to ask each of you to share your own story from your own perspective of this positive 2040 future. How did we get there? It can be really hard to get yourself in a mindset imagining that you are in the future. So I'll encourage participants to start sentences with "I remember," and in general to use past tense.
Okay, I remember back in 2025, our big city implemented a comprehensive bike sharing program that drastically reduced car usage, and other cities saw it and followed suit. That was a pretty pivotal moment. It accelerated the shift towards more sustainable urban transport.
Around the same time, several cities began adopting smart grid systems that efficiently manage energy consumption. They integrated renewable energy sources, and those systems became a model for even more cities to enhance their own energy sustainability.
Back in the year 2027, we saw a rise in urban farming initiatives that provided local food sources and green spaces that help with food security and also helped environmental sustainability, and they improved the quality of life in cities. But also, as part of that, they help foster community resilience as well.
By the year 2030, public-private partnerships were really common. All over the city, they were taking buildings and turning them into mixed-use spaces, so people were living in spaces right next to where they could work. There were also recreational spaces built in, and suddenly these urban communities were much more vibrant than they used to be, and they're also self-sustaining.
In 2032, waste management systems became really advanced. They were integrated into city life, and along with increased recycling, that led to cleaner and healthier urban environments.
A few years later, some really strong policies were introduced by government that supported health and education and social inclusion, or the building blocks of communities. That slowly transformed cities into hubs of well-being. By then, those public transport networks were robust. They were seamlessly integrated into things like bike sharing and pedestrian-friendly infrastructure, and suddenly cities just began to work.
You'll notice that all of those examples came in chronological order, and that's not by accident. We ask group members to pick a year and tell us what's happened. We usually get them to stand at the front of the room and tell the story from as far back as they can remember. So we started remembering back what had happened in 2025 and completed in 2035, just before we'd reached that 2040 vision. There's something really powerful about having people embody what is happening in these dates. It's a nice way to sum up the entire Three Horizons exercise by standing up, moving to where that year is, and sharing back with the group what had happened at that time. The storytelling process helps you see that larger pattern and dynamic of change, and the idea is that it provides a bit of closure and a sense of how those earlier discussions fit into the big picture. Once that exercise is over, I'll often close the workshop by asking the participants to share back one key learning or one key takeaway from the course of the workshop. That gives the participants the opportunity to reflect on the last few hours and compare their own experiences and takeaways with others in the group. Before we wrap up, it's important to mention that the Three Horizons framework doesn't end there. There is a crucial next step called action planning, and that involves developing specific strategies and actions based on the insights gained from the Three Horizons mapping. This action planning is essential to making the transition from conceptual ideas to real-world implementation. So that's going to involve identifying key actions, assigning responsibilities, setting timelines, determining what resources are needed. We want to make sure that the momentum gained during this workshop continues and leads to meaningful and sustainable change. There's information in the show notes for you to find out more about what action planning involves and how to do it yourself. Thanks for listening to this Imagined Three Horizons workshop. We hope it has provided you with some tips and maybe some inspiration to try out the tool in your own work. Let us know how you get on.